Welcome back, everyone, to the Gordon Report. It's April 2021. Hard to believe. We're almost one third of the way through 2021, far-fetched from where we were a year ago at this time. And we're going to welcome back Dr. Ed Gordon. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you. Well, I'm in Rancho Mirage, California this morning.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah.
And good change of pace for you and your lovely bride. So, and enjoying some warm weather out of Chicago, right?
Right. Yes.
So, but we're still faced with the, what you've called the job shock. And this month we're going to focus on knowledge shock to some degree. We're going to be talking about that. But in preparation, I went back and looked at a couple things. You and I, we talked, your ears must have been ringing. I was talking with Joya on Wednesday on our show. Yeah. And we were talking about, a lot of the work you've done. The three of us, you've been talking about it for quite a long time, but you had a few books, and I think that's how we met in early 2000s. You had many books before that, but you had a book there. I was starting to talk about the perfect labor storm. Hard to believe 21 years ago was when I first introduced that term. Joyce had just written, I think, Impending Crisis. And again, we were all talking about the same thing. Here we are 20 years later. We're still talking about the same thing, but I went back and did a little research on some of the things that you said, and then we'll bring it into the current workplace and talk about what are some of the fixes. You had written, and this was 10 years ago, so I quoted you 10 years ago, 74% by 2020. So this was a test to see how well you predicted things. By 2020, 74% of high-paying jobs, there'd be 74% of jobs would be high-paying jobs for high-skilled workers. Okay, but the stat that stuck with me, and I think this is where we are in 2021, is 123 million jobs. There's 123 million people. I'm sorry, there's 123 million jobs, but there would only be 50 million people who would qualify.
Right.
Okay. And from what I'm hearing and the calls I'm getting, and I'm sure what you're doing, and if anybody follows any of the reports from McKinsey to Deloitte to Boston Consulting Group, every single day we're hearing companies are struggling to find workers. Right. And we hear a million excuses. So, but you also talked about, and you can see it on the bottom here. This was a quote of yours. Was the abundance of labor the poverty of talent?
Correct.
Right. That sort of sums up where we are, right?
That pretty well sums up where we are. And now today, what we want to talk about is the source of the talent. In the next Gordon Report, we'll talk about the current talent pool, the adults, but let's look at the source of the talent. Well, now we are just beginning at these opening stages of coming out of COVID-19. Most students have lost a year of education. Now, what that means is that this puts us behind the 8 ball, because before COVID occurred, we had huge numbers of students graduating from high school who were not prepared for any form of post-secondary education or training. I mean now a certificate, apprenticeship program, or going to college and getting a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. Why is that important? Because now those young people, those 18-year-olds, in order to get a decent, good paying job with benefits, and that's what people want, they need a certain level of a general education. What do I mean? Comprehension of letters, numbers. In other words, do you remember and understand what you read, whether it's a formula or it's a sentence, all right? And also, can they communicate? Can they write a letter, a report that it communicates clearly to other people? Can they work on a team Do they have the necessary ability to work with a group of other people and communicate with them? Also, over using all of the social media devices, but can they do it ad hoc as well? Can they pick up a phone and have a meaningful conversation with a client, a customer, who happens to call up and ask them something out of the blue that they really have not had time to sit down and write an outline or prepare? Can they do all of that? Well, about a third of the 18-year-olds can, coming out of private and public high schools throughout the United States. The hitch is that's not enough. The fourth industrial revolution now requires we have a bigger group. So we have a third get it, and the next third, so they're the knowledge workers. Okay, Ira, they're the knowledge workers. The next third have reached sort of, they've got there, but they're not quite prepared. All right, and they're not ready to just go to college or to get into a job because many of them never learned how to learn. I call them the walking dead. And then the bottom third are far below grade level in reading and math. Maybe they graduate from high school with reading at the 8th grade level or even below 6th grade. They're the techno peasants. They're the individuals who, unless they can somehow miraculously improve their education on their own, will never have a decent job. So we have a third of the workforce, but right now we need more than 2/3 of the workforce to fill these jobs. So, and the boomers are leaving. So that's about a third of the boomers, 70 million, who also were knowledge workers, whether they were an electrician or a plumber, or they were a doctor or a lawyer or an ace salesperson or a technician of some sort, or an auto mechanic. They're leaving the workforce. So a large part of the jobs that we now have to fill are replacing those people. Yeah, automation has eliminated the low pay and some of the middle jobs, but not a lot of the skilled jobs, the jobs that require these levels of general education foundation plus some form of training for a specific job and career area. All right, so that's the general, that's where we're at right now.
Right. So, and again, there's a million points that you have in there, but you know, when I was going back and looking for some of that information, right. In 2011, one of my Perfect Labor Storm blog posts talked about, and this was from Gary Hamel. He talked about this creative economy, that we moved from an economy of physical capital, which was the industrial economy, to information economy, and people still think we're in the information economy, but we're actually beyond that. We're in this creative economy. We're talking about ideas, but the type of work that needed to be done was solving problems that were either known or new. So a lot of what we taught was a known problem could be scripted. We can teach people routines. That's where, going back to Frederick Taylor and Sloan's model of management, is that if you can look as it's ironic, if you look at people as robots, if we could just tell them what to do, if they do step 1, step 2, step 3, we put them on a line, and it's just repetitive. They do all the work over and over again. Right. That was the world we live in. But we still train people that way. We train people that if they have this set of knowledge, that the problems are fixed and they can apply the same rules to all the problems. But it's now been reversed, is that we live in this era of uncertainty. We live in a time where every day it seems that there's something new that pops up, not totally unexpected, but we're faced with something new because it probably just happened sooner than we expected or at an inopportune time. So we need to prepare people, as you said, not only the basics, can they read and write and do some basic math, although a lot of that can be done on a calculator and it's automated, but how do they apply that knowledge? I mean, that's even the second step. One is they need some basic knowledge, and then how do they apply that knowledge for the jobs? And there is no script.
Right. Well, it's called innovation. So how does innovation happen? Well, you buy all that technology for your company, You're an insurance company, you're an auto dealership with the latest computer equipment to repair these high-tech cars. You're in a hospital, you're in an office setting, and these new problems come. Well, they require something called combinational logic. All right. You take information and you arrange it in new ways to answer that particular problem. What I'm saying to you is a third of the people coming out of high school have that combinational logic ability. So they've learned how to learn and they can adapt. That's how productivity is improved. That's how innovation happens. The technology does not cause the innovation. It's the thinking young adult or current employee who has the ability to combine and recombine information and use the technology to create a new service or a new product of some sort. All right. So, yeah, we have a problem. Now, this has been growing. You were talking about in 2000 when you issued your book, and I had a book called Skill Wars, Winning the Battle for Productivity and Profit. And that was the theme of that book. Then the 2010 meltdown, which came out right before 2010, talked about, hey, we're going to lose all those skilled baby boomers. And guess what? The number of young people coming into the workforce, particularly after 2020, is going to decline. Plus, we got to ramp up that generation is better educated than the baby boomers. All right. Okay. Have we done it? No, we have failed to do it. The first time in American history that the generation that has come into the workplace is not better educated than the generation that's retiring. They're not worse, they're just not better. And unfortunately, with all the technology that the people that are listening to us and looking at this today, that your companies have loaded up on, you now require these knowledge workers, all right, who can think creatively and have learned how to learn. They've learned how to unlearn and then relearn, okay? But it all starts with elementary and secondary school and preparing for the long term for the next generation. We've blown it. We simply haven't done it. So now we're behind the 8 ball. We have to do something radically different in elementary and secondary education to better prepare the kids in school now, or we face a significant decline in the economy because that technology is simply not going to save us all by itself.
So Ed, I'm in, we're dealing with employers all day long. And the most recent, one of the surveys that came out from ZipRecruiter said that they have 15 million jobs. There's 15 million open jobs that companies are looking for that they're struggling to fill. We're down to 6% unemployment, which is great from where we were just a year ago. Now that's just what the reported unemployment. I know we talk about how many people are underemployed and how many people are just trying to string jobs together. So we have 6.1, but college, the 4-year graduate unemployment rate is 3.6%. So we're already well below full employment for what we're talking about. Not necessarily only college educated, because a lot of jobs don't require a 4-year degree. But again, some level of that. But even the high school unemployment rate, those with just the high school degree, just the diploma, is about 7%, I believe. I don't remember what the decimal is, but the 6.9 or 7%. So again, we're really we're almost back to that full employment state, and the economy hasn't even recovered. I mean, companies are still ramping up. We're trying to get people back in. So ultimately, what are, we talk about that we need to fix it. So there's an immediate problem of how do companies fill that, but then there's also the long-term problem. This isn't going away. I mean, we've been talking about 20 years, and I hate to say we're right, but we were right. And again, we took our
Mhm.
Yeah, we took a
Yeah.
lot of our research from other people's research. So the reality is we were right. The numbers are close. Some of them are worse. Some of them are slightly better, but we're close. It's going to 2030, and I know next month you're going to report on this, some new numbers of what the next 10 years is going to look like. What can we do now? I mean, one is, where do we start? You talked about K to 12 needs to be revamped.
Yes.
What does that look like? What can we do as employers? What can we do as parents and grandparents to help make that happen?
Okay. Number one, learning starts at home before a child enters a classroom. Parents need to do more to encourage their kids to learn, to read, and when they're in school, to make school the number one priority in that child's life. I don't mean to exclude sports, video games, socializing with kids, playing outside, using social media. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying those things now, with the majority of kids, take far more time than reading for recreation, doing their homework every day, and the attitude of people about education in general. We have siphoned off, we've siphoned off the best brains into business because we underpay a lot of math and science teachers. We even underpay people who teach reading, even people who teach history. Right now people say history is a bunch of bunk, it's a bunch of crap, we don't need it anymore. Well, a lot of people who teach history don't have a degree in history. Oh, a lot of people who teach math and science to your kids, they don't have degrees in that. So one thing we could do is front load the salaries for people in those particular occupational areas, so we get more of the best and brightest. So we have the parents, what they're doing with their kid at home. Are they checking the homework? If the parents don't read, the kids don't read.
Yeah. So Ed, let me just stop there, because
sure.
We're obviously not lower income. We're not in the top 1%. I know. I don't know how much you make, but I'll speak for at least myself, and you can agree with that. But I'm not nowhere near the top 1%.
Right.
But I'm not near the bottom either. And but it's challenging. I mean, we would have had the resources. You and I and people like us would have certainly had the resources to help our kids get through the past year. But now you have millions and millions of people. So one is, they may not have they may not even have broadband. They don't have the connections. They don't have the computer. A lot of parents, unfortunately, don't have the education to even, they can have their kids read, but what are they going to read? Because last year there were millions of people that were trying to put food on the table, or they were also they were working. You look at all the frontline workers who are putting in 60, 80 or more hours a week, and those frontline workers were also parents, trying to do this. So again, we can talk about teaching kids at home, but I'm struggling a little bit to say, I think a lot of the kids if you had the resources and you weren't doing it, then you need to teach your kids. You need to do that parenting, take that parental responsibility, and make sure your kids are reading and doing their homework and learn, at least learning. It's not even homework, learning, doing something. There's a million resources, free resources that you can do that. There's a lot of people just don't have the resources. And that's, when you talk about 150 million people that are at risk for losing their jobs, being displaced, being underemployed, being in low-paid jobs, competing for a percentage of low-paid jobs. How do we close that gap? I mean, how do we? That's a society problem as well.
Let's look at two things. Let's look at before COVID. We weren't doing these things. A third of the parents were. The next third said they were, but they really weren't participating in it. They still put sports as a more important activity in their child's life than doing reading, doing their homework, Now, with COVID, you have an international health disaster. This is an extraordinary time period. Hopefully, the vaccinations program that's going on in the United States, just today I heard that they hope soon the Center for Disease Control will tell you won't have to use your masks when you're outdoors. And the one expert that I was listening to said they're hoping by the end of this summer, we won't need to use masks indoors either if you've been vaccinated. I'm looking at now, so this past year is a loss. It just compounded the neglect that was going on before. Part of it is parenting skills. If you're a parent, put education as something that was important and followed up and supported that, and you had those habits of learning in your home, you're probably fine. But I have news for you. Now, for a long time, I tutored kids at home. I had a business that did that. And the number one thing we found out for high income and middle income people and lower income people, the reason their kids need to be tutored, they didn't have those habits of learning. They said they supported education, but in reality, they didn't.
Well, education and learning are not exactly the same.
No, but learning at home is number one. A child learns how to learn at home first, and then the teacher reinforces it in the classroom. All right? So I completely agree with you. During this COVID time period, where all these people were thrown out of work, and they had to work more jobs and more hours, it would be much more difficult to do what I'm talking about. But now we're coming to the end of this. And I'm pointing out to your audience, and many of them are saying, well, I helped my kids with their homework, and I took them to museums, and I bought them books to read, and I didn't run down teachers and education or a bunch of dummies. And if my kid did bad in school, I didn't immediately presume that the teacher was an idiot, and my child had deserved an A no matter what they did. What we want to make sure is we don't dumb down education more. There's a big movement now in education to do that, to get rid of grades, to get rid of all tests, get rid of meritocracy in terms of who does better. Let's level everyone to the same level. We've done that already. Our schools are vast mediocrity markets in the main. There are exceptions. There are exceptions, and that we have some great teachers and we have some great schools out there. But don't kid yourself. Majority of those suburban public and private schools and city schools, your kids aren't all right. They're not reading at grade level. They're not doing math at grade level. They can't write properly. All right.
So what can we do to change that? I mean, we know that it needs to be changed, but what can we do to change that?
All right. Think of this as a boat. The parent is at the rudder. The parent, he or she, the two parents are guiding this little boat. There's one oar, and on it is the educators. We have to make sure that first, the parents promote education to steer the boat in the right direction for the kid. Second, we need more exceptional teachers. To do that, we need to pay them more when they start. So, hey, I'm a math major. What can I do? I can go to a local high school and I can teach math and make 50 grand a year or 60, or I can go into a business, get an MBA and make 150 grand a year. What am I going to do? Let's see. I think I'll go to the 150 grand. But I like kids. I like to teach. I'm good at it. I really would like to do that, but I can't afford it. We could front load the salaries. Other countries do this. They take their best and brightest and they make sure they get an undergrad degree in math or science or history, English or whatever. And then they get 1 year of teaching math, teaching science, teaching history, teaching people to read. All right. And they start at a much higher salary than our teachers do.
Yeah.
All right.
But Ed, I mean, let me, okay.
Yeah. That's the third thing, our business. They have the other oar in the boat. Because you see, as I told my students in the MBA programs, everything I teach you in 5 years from now will be obsolete unless your employer keeps you up to date. Only a third of companies are doing that in the American marketplace now. All right. So it's a triumvirate of knowledge to push this forward. And some people do it, some companies do it, some parents do it, and some schools do it. But that's not the culture. This is a cultural problem. It's the reality that the technology, the fourth industrial revolution, the change in the demographics throughout the world. We can't import knowledge workers from India and China and Germany. They're all short workers as we are. All right. We have to increase our human resource here, our knowledge capital, so that we have the people to do this work.
As I mean, obviously, we have a huge task at hand, and to get those salaries, I can't agree with you more. We don't value teachers, especially good teachers. A lot of good teachers leave the professions, but that's going to take some time. We're going to have to get those people to get increased salaries, especially when municipalities and cities and states are really going to struggle over the next couple of years. I mean, many of them are on the verge of bankruptcy. Where's that money going to come from? And then we're also trying to close the gap, not necessarily in the middle class and higher income areas, but we need to educate everybody, 100% of the population. And on top of that, I mean, if you want to add insult to injury here, 90 in a survey, I can't remember, it was Deloitte or McKinsey, said that 94% of employers agreed that their workforce needs to be reskilled. But they also felt that it was the employee responsibility. Now, there are some companies that are offering training and retraining and upskilling, but at the same time that we're talking about training, better educating the next generation, we're looking at the current workforce, that 50% of the people need reskilling in the next 5 years, or 50% of the skills that they need core skills will change, which means that the current workforce needs training. For employers, and I'm looking from the employer side, I mean, employers are going to need to offer immediate opportunities. And look at it. I mean, if they're waiting to say, well, it's the government's problem and the school's problem and universities' problem and colleges that are going to have to educate better workers, it's not going to happen. That's not going to happen overnight. I mean, and hopefully the infrastructure bill will offer some dollars, but it's more. I don't care if they gave $2 trillion to fix this. It's not fixing all of these problems.
Businesses have a proprietary interest in increasing the knowledge of their workforce. We've always been, the education system has always been behind career and a career education, and now it's caught up. I mean, now it's so far ahead. The technology is so far ahead of what schools are preparing to do. It's a disaster. That's where it's at. So what can we do? Okay, we went through this before. In the 80s, training and development took off in the United States. My company ran a training and development business, and that grew from 1980 to around the mid-90s. And then it started to level off. Short-termism took over. So now, what can we do? Well, let's raise the infrastructure. Let's talk about Biden's bill. There's only $40 billion in that huge bill for worker training. That's ridiculous. Who's going to put in those roads and bridges? Well, give a guy a shovel and he can go out there with a hammer and do it. No, he can't. We have significant shortages of those skilled types of workers that build roads, bridges, buildings, etc. Look at the surveys. The small business, the Independent Foundation of Independent Businesses, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, report that small companies are going crazy right now. The highest level they've ever experienced. The skilled trades are crying out right now. We need more apprenticeship programs. Some unions resist that. They want to keep the number of skilled people artificially short so they can keep the wage up. I have news for you. You're losing all your boomer plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and other skilled people. We need to robustly increase this. So what can companies do? They can push, they can ask that we can write off the cost of training and development and education programs like to do plant and equipment. You have physical capital, you have human capital. Why don't we have that ability to do that? Well,
hopefully that'll change with the new SEC requirements and everything, because it's no longer to be an expense, it's going to be an asset. If
I've been advocating this, and many other labor economists have been advocating the ability to treat this type of an expense as an investment, like they do investing in plant and equipment.
But treat people as, if people truly are the most important asset within a company, then it needs to be treated. They need to be put on a balance sheet, not on a profit and loss statement. And now that the SEC is requiring a lot of that, hopefully we'll see an impetus for that change beyond rhetoric rather than a post on the wall. And we are unfortunately, we're actually a little bit over, so I appreciate everybody hanging in there who's been listening to us and following us. I really appreciate it. Ed, I'll throw it to you for kind of a closing comment, kind of 30-second close on this.
Absolutely. Right. Well, folks, we know what to do. I've outlined these approaches many times over. Look at the Gordon reports on our website, imperialcorp.com. If you want more, read Future Jobs, Solving the Employment and Skills Crisis, which outlines more. And we are going to talk about more detail about how these solutions are being done right now in the United States in some communities. All right, we're going to get into that over the next few months.
And that's a great segue, Ed, and a great close. Appreciate that. If you go to imperialcorp.com, it's scrolling across the bottom of the screen, which is Ed's website. You can reach out to Ed, and there's a number of other consultants there. But looking at solutions, what can be done? Because it is being done in other communities. As a start, this is a huge, huge problem. It's going to require a lot of innovative ideas, a lot of new minds, a lot of new ideas. And a lot of support. And it's not only about money. I mean, sometimes it's the money's there and people are willing to invest, but they don't know where to invest it. So it's about having building a community, having a conversation, and also looking, what other people are doing to help that. I want to thank everybody who's been watching this or who will watch it in the future. On the replays, you can get this on YouTube and Facebook as well. We're back. Typically, we do this the fourth Friday of each month at noon. And next month, Ed will be back with me, and we'll be talking about the next stage of the Job Shock report, which is Ed's white paper. And also, if you want to, Ed's books are for sale up there as well. For me, just a kind of quick close here. Let me see if I can run these across. Where's the banners? So there's two things that I've been offering lately. We're talking about adaptability. That's another one of the skills. It's actually the number one in-demand skill from LinkedIn Learning determined that the number one in-demand skill was adaptability, which includes unlearning. What are the behaviors that we need to unlearn as well as learn? And on May 20th, if you follow the link that's on the screen, on May 20th, I'll be doing a webinar and talking about how to build adaptability in both your teams and the workforce. And then also for those who are struggling recruiting, not because there's a shortage of people, but because your branding is a bit off. I've put up one of my keynote, my most popular conference topic, which is duct tape won't fix your effed up candidate experience. And effed up is actually FCDD, which you can stand there, which is don't make it frustrating, confusing, disappointing, and distracting. When people apply, you can't put up a million roadblocks to your company because it's competitive, as we talked about. There's too few people looking for, there's too many jobs with too few people looking. So if you make too many bad hurdles on your recruitment process, they're going to go elsewhere because they have that opportunity, those choices. So you can also get to the webinar And that's 24/7. So you sign up and you can watch it at any time. So you go to bit.ly/duct tape FCDD. And there's actually, for those who are in SHRM, you can get 1 SHRM credit for that. So until next week, or next month, next week is Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. That's actually Wednesday, 1 p.m. With our mutual friend, Joyce Joya, my co-host. We're going to be talking about women in the workplace and ageism, gender ageism, next Wednesday at 1 p.m. And you can also get that on YouTube and Facebook. So until then, please stay safe, everybody. We're not out of the woods yet. Again, if you're not vaccinated, you get vaccinated. If you are vaccinated, wear your mask. And even if you are vaccinated, wear your mask, just to be extra safe until we're just on that cusp, and hopefully everybody will be there. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for participating, for watching. Please spread the word. We need everybody's help to help solve this. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.